And the dust isn't blowing.
Yeah.
Guys, I wish Facebook Live had scent vision, kind of like Willy Wonka, because the smell coming out of this smoker is just amazing on this beautiful day. Whoever did the rain dance or was praying for rain, thank you so much. Please continue it, because it was a nice, beautiful day, and we got rain last night. Got on our screen the Gebo'S Grillmasters magnet. You can get those at any Gebo'S, free with a $10 purchase. It's a magnet to go on your grill. Drew's going to talk about them in a couple minutes and how to tell. Give a couple more minutes for people to jump on. And you get to see these brisket burgers and cobbler cooked on the pellet smoker. We did brisket burgers. This coming Saturday is National Brisket Day, National Burger Day, and National Beef Burger Day. So we did brisket burgers, which were the best, and some cobbler. Drew, you about ready?
I'm ready when you are.
Start us up. I got you.
Folks, one more episode of Grillmasters. We do this every month. This month was burgers and brisket. So since we didn't have like 18 hours to cook a brisket, we ground up some brisket, actually brisket point, made hamburgers out of them. I'll talk to you a little bit about that. But first I want to talk about, when I say brisket point, what that means. So a brisket, actually, there's two briskets on a cow, right? They're actually the pectoral muscles in front of and behind, below the front legs. There's what's called a point and a flat. So when you buy a brisket packer or a market trim brisket, you'll notice one end is kind of thin and one end is kind of big. Well, those are two muscles, and the grains run two different ways. They're separated by a layer of fat, so you can actually take a knife and separate those muscles before you cook it, and just leave it hanging just a little bit so it's all one piece. The flat is where your slices come from when you go to a barbecue place and you get sliced brisket. The point is typically where chopped brisket comes from for chopped sandwiches, or a lot of guys will cook that point at the same time. They'll cube it up, put it back in a pan in the smoker with more seasoning, and cook the little 1-inch cubes, and we call those burn ends. So it wasn't until like the 80s when brisket became popular. Up until the 60s, it was a byproduct and was never even put in the stores because it is such a tough cut of meat. That muscle works so hard because cow doesn't have a collarbone, so that muscle actually supports the entire weight of the front end of the animal. So there's a lot of connective tissue in that in a brisket, in that muscle. So you have to cook it for a long time, low and slow. A lot of people do it hot and fast. I can't ever make that work. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing, but low and slow, just like any other big piece of meat, kind of renders that fat down and makes it a little bit more palatable for children. So for the burgers we have going on today, we've got about 5 pounds of brisket point that is ground up, and I mixed that in a bowl with 2 3-ounce cans of diced green chilies, the mild green chilies. I cooked a pound of black label bacon and mixed that in after it was crispy and drained, but I did put the bacon grease in the meat as well. You know, Southern guy, we don't put bacon grease away. There's an 8-ounce bottle of ranch dressing. The ranch dressing you'll have to put on your salad, not the little packet. Some spices and seasonings, steak rub, salt, pepper, garlic, whatever you choose, and an 8-ounce bag of shredded sharp cheddar cheese. Put them on the smoker. You can cook them hot and fast, but with the cheese in there, the bacon's already done, green chilies are already done. I like to cook them slow at about 225 and let them absorb that smoke. So it takes them, depending on how thick the hamburger patties are that you make, anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours. You want to get it to 160 degrees because it's beef, it's ground beef. Pretty much like any other cut of meat, when you take it off the grill, if you put it in a pan and cover it with fuel, the temperature's going to rise 5 or 10 degrees. So you can actually pull at 150 or 155. I get them to 160, take them off the smoker, put them in a pan. We've got some of them here. We've already had lunch today, but And since they're smoked, you don't really have to flip them or anything. If you cook them on a griddle or a hot grill, you know, you got to flip them, but I just threw these on there raw. And these are ready to come off. So we're going to pull those off. And we're going to just brush the grill down a little bit. Burgers turned out pretty well, I think.
The burgers were absolutely amazing. Guys, we will have Drew's recipe for these brisket burgers, the recipe, Stephanie's recipe for the cobblers that we're about to put on, and everything up on our website as soon as I get them changed to a recipe card and we get this video up. You can also get one of the Grillmaster magnets and scan that QR code and it will take you right to our page where I'm going to keep recipes and anything that Drew does. He's promised to share this recipe so you can try to recreate it at home. So get yourself a Gebo'S Grillmaster magnet, put it on your grill, and then you can scan if you're looking for a recipe or whatever. We're going to keep those up there for you to take a peek at any time or print off.
So I'm going to scrape the grill down. I'm going to crank the heat up to about 300, 350. Let that come up to temp. That way if there's any hamburger fat or brisket fat, anything like that, cheese, if it's going to burn, we want that to happen before we put the cobblers on. You know, a little hint of smoky flavor to a cobbler is one thing, that's okay, but nobody wants a burnt tasting cobbler. So if there is anything on the grill after the burgers or brisket, whatever it is you're cooking, I want to crank the heat up and burn that off a little bit. And then I've also got a piece of foil that we'll lay down over the grill so you don't get messy stuff on the bottom of the cobbler pans and take it in your house and get all over the counter. Your wife probably won't like that. But so while we're waiting on that to happen, let's talk about cooking a brisket. Typically, like when I cook a brisket, I will buy what's called a packer brisket. You can get a packer brisket or a market trim brisket. A packer brisket comes straight from the slaughterhouse or the packer plant, and it's in a thick plastic which is called cryovac, and it looks kind of shrink wrapped. And it's thick plastic. You got to cut that off and then rinse the brisket. And when you buy one like that, you need to trim it. I like to trim it. You can turn the brisket over, and there's what's called a fat cap on the flat side of that. Some guys like to leave all of that fat cap on. I do not. I cut it down to where it's about 1/4 of an inch or 3/8 of an inch thick all the way across, especially on the flat. Because remember, that flat is that thin piece of brisket out towards the edge that actually hugs the cow's rib cage. So it gets a lot of work, and we need that fat to render down into that meat, make it tender. But I trim that, kind of square it up. If there's any loose flaps hanging off of it, cut those off, get rid of them. You can always throw all that in a pot, render that down. You know, you can make beef tallow, do whatever you want with it. Mine goes in the trash or goes to the dogs. But when you cook a brisket, there's really no set time. And I follow a lot of barbecue smoking grilling pages, and there's always arguments on there about how long you need to cook a brisket, how long do I smoke it, what temp. I go for 225 on pretty much anything, because that's just an even temp for me. I can smoke hams, pork loin, brisket, pork butt, cook everything at 225. For brisket, for me, I cook it until it's done. The way I know that it's done is I take a wooden skewer, like you use for shish kebabs, and when I can push that skewer into the side of that brisket against the grain and it feels like you're pushing it into butter, then my brisket's done. And there's still some sliceability, right? It doesn't just fall apart. If you want it to fall apart, let it go a little longer. The competition guys, they want a little bit more tug, so they'll slice that brisket and they want to be able to tug it, pull it apart, and you can tell by looking at it, and there's just a little, they call it brisket pull. Some people want it to fall apart. I prefer the sliced end of the flat to actually slice and not fall into pieces, so you can have brisket slices. But I don't want to chew on a piece of boot leather either, right? Hence the point, the fatter part of the brisket, the flat's going to get done before the point does. So oftentimes you can take that flat, take it out when the flat's done, when that skewer will go in sideways like butter. Take that out, separate the point, put the point back on the smoker and smoke it until it's done. Temperature-wise, my briskets are usually done between 205 and 215. One thing you'll run into if you're new to smoking a brisket, you'll put it on the smoker, your temp's going to start coming up real fast, and you think, oh my gosh, there's no way it's going to last for 16 or 18 hours. It's going to mess up. Just be patient. it's going to be okay because it's going to hit what's called the stall. Once your brisket hits about 160, 165 degrees, it's just going to quit climbing, and that's called the stall. Now, it's going to stay there. It could stay there for 2 hours, could stay there for 20 minutes, but it will eventually start climbing again. What you can do is wrap it. That's called the Texas crunch. I prefer the brown butcher paper, or you can use foil. So what that will do is speed up the cooking process. Typically a big chunk of meat will stop taking smoke in when it hits about 160, 165 degrees. The cellular structure of the meat changes. They say the pores close, but there's not really pores in meat. What happens is that it will continue to take smoke flavor. The smoke ring won't get any thicker. Once it gets to that temperature, the smoke ring's as thick as it's ever going to be. But you can use that Texas crunch, meaning wrap it with foil and it's virtually steaming it, so it'll cook a little faster. If you use brown butcher paper, which is what a lot of the competitors use, and what I prefer, it lets it breathe, but it does speed it up a little bit because it's holding the heat in, but it's not holding the moisture in, so it's not actually steaming the brisket. You're going to try, you're going to fail. We all do. People that have been cooking brisket for a lot longer than I am old still mess briskets up. I mean, again, it was not until the 60s that brisket was even sold in the market, and it was basically a byproduct that never even hit the grocery stores. So I think we're hot enough now. We can see some of that kind of burning off. That's what I was talking about. You don't want that in your cobbler, so we want to let that keep burning off and get rid of all that fat and that grease that fell down off of those burgers. Once that's gone, we've got a couple of cobblers here that Stephanie here at the office put together for us, so we're going to throw those on and cook those the same amount of time, same temperature as you would in the oven, and then we're going to enjoy those with some hopefully some Bluebell ice cream. But that's it. So that's burgers and brisket. Again, I cook my burgers low and slow when they're like that. You can cook them hot and fast in a skillet, hot and fast on a griddle, hot and fast on a grill like this if you can open up that slide there and sear them. But for me, I like it tender, and when you cook them slow, they typically will not dry out. Keeping all that fat in that meat, some of it's going to run out. But if I try to cook burgers hot and fast, they're either not done or they're burnt and dry.
I'm going to remind y'all again, if you're interested, all of our Gebo'S locations now have these Grillmaster grill magnets. They stick to your grill, have the temperatures, the internal temperature that you need to have to make sure your meat is cooked or your fish. And on the upper left-hand corner is a QR code, which will take you right to the link of our Gebo'S Grillmasters page that will have Drew's recipes, Stephanie's recipes, and links to this video if you want to go back and look again on how to cook a brisket, how he did the brisket burgers. So we're going to let Drew put the cobblers on the grill, and we'll touch back with you later on how these cobblers turned out. But thank you for joining us. Please don't hesitate to message us any questions. I will get those to Drew and get answers back right away. We always love your questions. Thank you for joining us. And again, I wish you could smell this and the burgers. He cooked some earlier for lunch, and I now have a new favorite food, and it's these brisket burgers. So y'all have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Come back and join us next month. We'll have our next Gebo'S Grillmasters. Bye.